Yeah, you were. Oh, you want to be then? Yeah, you were.
All right, it is 4:10 on the dot, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Open Space Subcommittee. I am your chair, Regina T. Boyce, and here are all of our friends ready to go today. We've got a pretty big list, but I think we're going to get through some of these fairly quickly and some of them not so much, because they will have, there'll be some amendments for some of these bills forthcoming or already here. So, and we have natural resources, MDA here to comment as we need, because we do need some clarifications on some things. So we're going to start with HB3. Actually, no, who do I actually have here today right now? I do have Patrick. All right, we're going to start with HB 378, Delegate Love's Natural Resources Black Bear Conflict Reduction and Damage Reimbursement Fund Uses. This has a very large fiscal note, but after talking to the sponsor, they believe that they overestimated the appropriations needed. And so I believe hopefully a change of that will be coming through. Patrick?
Okay. I haven't seen any amendments changing the numbers or anything like that.
No, I just spoke to her last night, Patrick. I do apologize.
Did she give you an indication of what dollar level she was talking about?
That is something we could discuss with DNR about. Oh, I see Paul. Paul, how you doing, Paul?
Very well, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So the Black Bear Conflict Reduction Damage Reimbursement, can you give us just a little bit more background as it relates to currently the number of, I guess, reimbursements sought out versus how much this fund could potentially need or not need? I know that may be a line for you as far as what you can say, but.
Sure. I'm happy to try to help fill in some of the gaps. So the fund has been woefully underfunded historically. The sources of the money were supposed to come from the sale of these Black Bear stamps and the Black Bear prints. And we sort of took that to another level, and we did all kinds of swag, frankly, that we tried to generate interest. We then pivoted to asking, somewhat ironically, asking hunters who applied for the opportunity to participate in the Black Bear hunting lottery for a bear hunting permit to donate voluntarily. And that, frankly, is the vast majority of the money that's in the fund for reimbursement. We average, $2,500, and the applicants in the agricultural community get paid out on average about 25 cents on the dollar that they claim. So it's a small proportion of the claims amount per applicant, and I think I could say pretty comfortably that the vast majority of producers in bear country stopped applying for the fund because it wasn't worth their time to go through the process. It's a little bit arduous for them to follow up. So we've worked with. I'm happy that we've been able to work with our friends over at HSUS, and I see Jennifer on here to create something that's more substantial. I guess the last thing I'll say is, if you put 50,000 in there, I bet we get 50,000 in claims next year. They'll very quickly figure out that the money's available, and the damage will probably exist and the last for.
Okay. Fair enough. Jennifer, do you need to add anything? Can you add anything? I just need to talk to the sponsor about what dollar amount that looks like for her.
I did have a short discussion with a sponsor last night and then again this morning. I think in light of the budget situation at present, there's a willingness to go fairly low out of respect for just the fiscal constraints of the state. And we're aware that Delegate Allen has a bill that might raise some additional funding, so we could have a different conversation next year that might bring that number back up to in full disclosure. I will say that if the subcommittee decides to lower the total funding for the program, say to 50,000, which in the current bill is reserved for the existing restitution program, the delegate would like a change to the language about what's set aside for the restitution program. So it's a percentage of the total funds available, and not, we wouldn't want the restitution to take all the money. We want to make sure there's some money available for the sort of forward looking conflict avoidance program. But I think the delegate and I certainly agree, getting the conflict avoidance piece established is critical. And then we can hopefully nuance the funding as the subcommittee takes action on additional legislation that would raise more fees.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. I do have Delegate Allen's bill. Does the stamp for the bear hunting go up?
No, but it is our understanding that that pot of money that would be increased by the licensing could be applied to this program, because it would be within the purview of a sort of already authorized source. So it's a conversation we can revisit after the committee does its work this year.
And then if I can ask a question that I'm sure is a little dangerous, Paul, how long has the bear stamp been $5?
So we actually don't have a bear stamp per se.
No,
Yeah,
it's not a
all of
stamp.
our for the hunters, the
For the stamp decal for bear.
Yeah, so that's always been the same price, but it's not an item that hunters, it's not a license to hunt. So it's never been in the section of the title that a hunter is required to have that item to participate in the hunt, which is why it's not included in the list of stamps and licenses that will be raised should we move Delegate Allen's bill.
Got it. Okay. So we're clearly going to hold this bill, and hopefully by next week we'll have those clarifications and those amendments ready for us to go, so we can so the committee can vet it and decide whether or not we're going to move it along or not.
And
Thanks so
Madam
much.
Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Also, we should mention that the Farm Bureau has some suggested amendments. They wanted to raise the carve out for reimbursements to 75,000, which may need to be adjusted based on Delegate Love's amendment. And
I'm sorry.
they also wanted to eliminate the floor on reimbursements.
So just have it as a cap of 5,000 and not a floor of the 500.
Yeah, no floor. Keep the
No
cap,
floor.
but no floor.
And it's my understanding the sponsor is comfortable with that. I think the only question I think is how much money totals in the program, and then how much can be set aside for the existing restitution fund.
And another issue, because the fiscal note wasn't just the 1 million, there was 250,000 extra. How much by reducing the scope of the program, and we won't know this, but by reducing the scope of the program, how much does that take down the 250? We'll have to try to get some sort of an answer on that too.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Jennifer, you said you were talking about the grant funding under this the capped amount. You said go up to 75,000 versus the 50. I missed that.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's a Farm Bureau requested amendment.
Jennifer, I think you were maybe going to say something about the Farm Bureau amendment. Did you have any?
Yes, only that the only request to the subcommittee is to keep the programs in balance. So we have this existing restitution fund, which doesn't do as much to prevent, future conflicts. And the goal is to create this prevention program. So while I think there's certainly a willingness from all parties to protect the existing restitution program and make sure that there is some portion of the funding there, if say the total amount for the overall program is lowered to a certain amount, we just have to keep the two in balance.
That's
So
why I asked this. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So if we lowered this to 50,000, then 75,000 doesn't make sense for.
No.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, Delegate Ruth. It was like if it's 75 and we drop down to 50, it's more like it's going to have to be 50 and drop down maybe to 25 or 15 or something like that. Does that sound about right, Patrick and Jennifer?
Something like that.
I see Delegate Allen shaking his head. What's up?
Oh, I apologize. I was just cracking my neck.
Oh, I thought you were like, ah.
No. I agree.
Okay, so we're going to move along. We know this bill needs some work, and hopefully we'll have those clarifications next week to move on. HB 386, bit of a sponsor problem, but we're just going to go with it anyway. This is Delegate Jacobs, Natural Resources Blue and Flathead Catfish. There are no amendments on this bill. Patrick, there anything else we need to know about? Because I've read it thoroughly. I've read other things. It looks like it's ready to go, but I'm happy to be wrong.
I think it's ready to go. I just think it should be noted that I believe that our fearless chairman has done her job and has taken a blue cat out of the bay.
I did, and it was delicious. Thank you very much. Thanks to the sponsored Delegate Jacobs.
I'll move favorable.
Second.
Any
And we're gonna-
discussion?
And we're going to send out some more this summer.
Well, we cannot wait. I feel like this committee should have a special outing for study purposes.
I think the subcommittee size is just right.
Exactly. All in favor of moving? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. We have recommended to move HB 386. Sweet. Next bill, HB 406, Delegate Love's bill, hunting, snare traps, and other familiar devices identification requirements. There are no amendments on this bill as well. Patrick, is there any?
Well, this bill just requires a person who uses a snare trap or other devices to capture wildlife to ensure that their DNR ID number is stamped onto the device or affixed with a metal device.
I think one clarification we do need, there was a question about private property, and then if I have private property and I have a trap and I take it to my friend's house who has private property, it was clarified that I would in fact need to have an ID trap on my friend's
You
property.
would only be able to use a trap without ID on your own property or
That's
property you rent.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or questions about HB 406?
I got a question for Paul if he's still on there.
Yes. Oh, yep, here he is.
Hey, Paul, on this bill, it's the DNR number. Is that the red number like that we all get when we apply for a license?
Correct, Delegate. So this is the unique identification number you get when you set up your Maryland DNR account in what we call Compass.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that.
yep, that makes this a lot easier bill to
Yes,
manage.
yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a motion to move this bill?
I move favorable.
All right, that was got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Bill is, all those in favor of HB 406, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? HB 406 is moved, seconded, and voted out. HB 465, Delegate Otto's Natural Resources Recreational Crabbing License exemptions. I know from Patrick, I know there are some DNR amendments as well as mimicking the bill to the Senate cross file and adding collapsible traps, I think.
That's what the Senate amendment did, yes. And yes, they requested that we mirror the Senate bill, which generally I think is fine. But I had one concern that I'm kind of working with them on. If y'all give me permission in the sponsor, Delegate Otto.
Yes.
They mentioned that, currently you can use dip nets and maybe another gear to recreational crab. But they're only mentioning in their amendments the collapsible traps and net rings. And I'm wondering if by putting that in statute, we should also add the dip nets and anything else that they currently allow. You could probably move the bill, just with me continuing to work with the department to see if we need to just tweak the amendment.
Well, that sounds good to me, and I think you're right. We've always been able to use some kind of dip net.
Right, and I don't want to accidentally make that illegal.
I think you can use dip nets and chicken necks.
That was the other one I was wondering about, was trot lines for recreation.
Well, it's not a trot line. No, that's not a chicken neck, but I think
Not as long.
Yeah. Trot lines are a line on the bottom.
You're catching more with them anyway, commercially.
Okay. Hold on.
So if the committee be willing to move it on to a full committee, I could finalize that amendment, adopt the Senate amendments.
I move that.
I second.
Hold on. I think if I'm correct, we need to move the amendment and then the bill, Patrick.
Correct.
Okay, so all those in favor of amending the bill to the Senate version, is there a motion to do so?
I move that motion.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor of the amendment to mimic the Senate bill, say aye.
Aye.
You oppose? Abstentions? Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Second? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 You oppose? No abstentions? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have moved this bill to mimic the Senate version with Patrick looking into some additional details.
All right, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Kristen. Bamboozled. Okay, so bamboos. There are many options here, and I have Steve. There he is, Steve Connolly. I have sent him emails. We have had discussions. Steve, just so you know, there has been a desire to move the bill as is. There has been a desire to ban the invasive species of bamboo, and there have also been discussions about whether or not we can ban, whether or not this can just somehow be legislated to put on tier 1. Do we want to give MDA the ability to do so and then allow local jurisdictions to then do something about the bamboo that has kind of ran amok all over the place in certain places where it is bad? So I'll let you take it away.
Madam Chair, if I may, could I ask Kim Rice? She's the program manager for plant
Absolutely.
protections, and she's with us today, and that's kind of her area of responsibility.
No problem. Kim.
Hi,
Welcome
Madam
to the
Chair.
committee.
Thank you. Thank you. So Steve just asked me to kind of give you an update on sort of how IPAC works. So that's the invasive plant law. So we do weed risk assessments. Those are developed by USDA. We use science-based information. And within that weed risk assessment is a Maryland filter as well. And so that helps us figure out where these plants should land, essentially, either tier 1 or tier 2. And so Phylostachys, which is the running bamboo, is listed as tier 2 because in the Maryland filter, some of the questions that are asked are, is it widely distributed in Maryland? So that's a yes. So it is widely distributed. Is it feasible to control? Is it difficult to control? And it's very difficult to control. And so when some of those questions kind of fall out, they land tier 2 because our final question is it added as a tropical pressure from sales, significantly increasing the potential of the species to persist and spread? So because we work with the industry when this law was developed, that was sort of key. If we continue to sell this plant, will it cause increased issues? Probably not, because it's already throughout the state. So that question was answered as a no when it was done back in 2018. And so that landed it on tier 2. So for example, another plant that sits on tier 2 is Calorie Pear. And that's one of those plants. It's a tree in the spring, you'll see it blooming white flowers everywhere, all over the roadside. And so I spoke to some staff. We don't see this plant generally being sold in retail settings. So we regulate it at the retail setting. So that's sort of the background on that. And so we use the science to place these plants. We don't just put them in a tier. You know, we go through the weed risk assessments, which take a lot of work. Okay.
Actually, Leslie, Steve was kind enough to send me that image of the kind of like the yes or no. If you can find it for me, I'd like the committee to be able to actually see it.
Yeah, and
Sure.
Madam Chair, if I could,
Yes, Steve.
as the bill was written, we did not take a position on it because it didn't affect the agricultural article. It affected the local government article, and it just gave authority to the locals. So, you know, we just didn't take a position on the original bill. We were monitoring it, but weren't.
Yeah. So and I'm gonna ask this clarifying question, then I'm gonna ask Delegate Ruth to join. But to me, it is an issue, right? Like we've heard it is an issue. I was at brunch on Sunday and joked about it, and like 3 of the 5 people like almost went into a frenzy. It's like, oh my God, this stuff is terrible, because while you can purchase it, right, and while you get instructions about how to then plant it, not everybody does, right? And so we have this issue where now I have to take responsibility on my property for someone else's inability to follow directions and read. And so there are no recourses for the individuals who then now have to suffer from someone else's lack of care or following directions. And so there's no recourse for that person. The other person can do whatever they want or not, but it's now on me to continue to dig and dig and dig because of the way also the plant grows. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, if the bill was left as it is and left it up to local jurisdictions to decide if they want to, quote unquote, maybe ban it or maybe heavily regulate it in a way that maybe MDA is uncomfortable, then you wouldn't have a problem with that.
That's correct.
Okay.
But you know, I mean, we could go back and ask the IPAC to go to review again whether they think that the running bamboo should be run it through the decision tree again and see maybe if it should be moved to tier 1. We could certainly, and the IPAC is made up. There's people that are, it's in the code, the agricultural article. It spells out certain government representatives on the IPAC, as well as different parts of the industry that are included in representatives are included.
Okay. I'm going to call on Delegate Ruth and then Delegate Terrassa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Kim. That was very helpful. But so I think I understood you to say that the main reason it didn't make tier 1 is it's not widely sold in Maryland. Would that be fair to?
No,
Okay.
no. It did not make tier 1 mainly because the plant is found throughout the state. Generally, tier 1 plants are not found out throughout the state. So if we can stop them from being sold at the retail sites, we can actually reduce that plant existence in our natural environment. So generally tier 1
Okay.
plants are not widely found.
I understand. So it's because it is widely found that but it's not, it just seems like that's an issue with the matrix then, because even if it's widely found, it sounds like it's a problem that we don't want it to be more widely found. And so I guess I'm just confused about how, my concern is, yes, we want to stop people from planting it. And, I certainly, I support the bill as written, but I just also think we shouldn't put it on, homeowners to know, or whether, what the consequences are if the plant is available for sale. And so, I would certainly, you said 2018, it's been 5 years, although I would think it's more widely now than it was in 2018, but I certainly would think it's worth taking another look at it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Delegate Rasa. Yes, please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm a little confused about, I thought as it's written, it didn't give counties the permission, the ability to ban it. And weren't we checking on that, or am I just confused?
You're correct. The bill as introduced does not give the authority for a local jurisdiction to ban. Rather, the authority is to prohibit a person from allowing bamboo to grow without proper upkeep, or to allow it to spread to to a property of another. And as far as local authority, there was questions that were raised last week of whether a local jurisdiction would have that authority to do that without the bill. And there is, local jurisdictions have authority to enact laws, but what MACO responded with is that the authority varies by jurisdiction. And this bill would not be duplicative, and it would just give another, as they say, a tool in the toolbox to adopt a regulation to help control the spread. So they are in favor of this bill, and they think it helps those jurisdictions that don't have the broad authority to regulate.
So just to clarify, if I may, Madam Chair, sorry, construction outside. They're in favor of getting the ability to ban it, or they're just in favor of getting?
They're in favor of the enabling legislation that will allow a local jurisdiction to help to prohibit it to spread without or to grow without proper upkeep. There's not a prohibition being authorized in the language.
So to Delegate Ruth's point, I think it makes sense to also give them that authority. Or I guess Delegate Ruth might have been saying statewide ban it, but I do think that banning makes sense. Banning the sale makes sense, because I do think it puts a lot on the neighbor. And then once it's in your yard, now it's a lot on you to deal with, even if you'd never even purchased it or put it in to begin with. So that's just my 2 cents.
Sorry, I want to do a quick pause, and can you guys see the rating system, the high risk plants? Can you see the chart?
Yes.
Okay, for some reason now I can't see any of you all. And so here's what Kim was talking about. And I remember when I went through this, I got tier 1, but I could be biased. But this is essentially what she was talking about, and for which I also sent you an electronic copy of the kind of the model risk rating.
Since I don't want to jump ahead, but since we have it on the screen, could she go through what the answers were? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sure. So for bamboo, the first question, is the plant currently naturalized in Maryland? Yes, it is. What is the potential distribution in Maryland? It's wide. How feasible is control? It's difficult. Is added propagal pressure from sales significantly increasing the potential for persistence and spread? The answer to that was no.
Okay.
And so it landed in tier 2.
So Kim, can I do a follow-up of Delegate Ruth's question? So when you say naturalized in Maryland, I think of that as something it could be naturalized, but then one of its species may not be necessarily naturalized. So maybe I'm hung up on the word naturalized. When you say naturalized, what do you mean?
So I didn't originally write this, but what I think they mean is that you can find it throughout. So we use a lot of Department of Natural Resource data. And so if they're finding it throughout the state, I don't know if that means multiple counties, multiple sites. I think in the full weed risk assessment, they had over 20 sites that DNR knew about, it's growing on its own.
It's
naturally.
So
yeah, and it had to have been. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but that goes back to, isn't that the natural? So there's a Maryland quote unquote variety of bamboo, and then there's the other species that aren't necessarily native, that are more tropical, correct? That tend to be the ones that are planted and that are running.
Right, but native and naturalized aren't always the same thing. They don't.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yes, you're right. Okay, then that's true. They're not. So, but being naturalized, meaning that they were planted originally, but they are still growing on their own, and there isn't really any upkeep of it. Essentially, nobody's really keeping an eye on the plant, like roadsides, maybe state parks, things like that.
I'm going to stop sharing and then go to, I think Delegate Stein and then Delegate Jacobs, and then we'll go back to Delegate Terrassa and Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back to MACO's position. So MACO said they support the bill because not all counties might have this authority on their own, but they didn't take a position on the issue of being given authority to ban it. I guess maybe we didn't ask them specifically.
Right, we didn't ask that specifically. We don't have an amendment to that. So I have not, I didn't ask the question, so I don't know what their position is on that.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Jacobs.
So I'm just concerned about when you get down the lines 20, 21, 22 on the original bill, when it talks about the property of the person without proper upkeep and appropriate containment measures, isn't that kind of broad what appropriate containment measures are? I mean, I think in the hearing they talked about when it got to a certain diameter, then it had been there too long or something like that. And, I just think that this could lead up into some neighborhood fights too, to be honest with you.
Neighborhood fights as in like, it's in my yard and I don't want it?
I mean, like if it's in your yard and you might say, well, this is the way I like it. And, who's to say, well, that's not proper? You know what I mean?
I hear you. But what we're hearing is folks don't like it because they didn't plant it and it's coming up into their yard.
Well, if it gets across the property line, it's a different issue. But I mean, what he talks about here is to grow on the property of a person without proper upkeep. And I think that needs to be defined a whole lot more than just a person without proper upkeep.
Well, that's a fair question. I mean, that's a fair assessment and a question. From what I understand, and Kim can correct me, when you buy these plants, you're given instruction because apparently they cannot be sold because they can be invasive without giving you instruction on how to manage it. Is that correct, Kim?
There's a sign that sits with these plants that just warns people that these are invasive and that you should follow the rules. I mean, usually plants come with some kind of information and be aware, and it is suggested that you look for something else to purchase.
There you go. Discouraging message, they call it.
Discouraging, but it really doesn't tell you that it's a nightmare. Delegate Ruth, and then Delegate Terasa, and then Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to follow up on Delegate Tarasa's comments, where she said she wasn't sure if I meant statewide or authorizing in terms of banning. And I really think if we're going to ban it, we should do it statewide, because I think authorizing sales bans in local jurisdictions is going to create a hodgepodge that would be confusing to retailers, where they can sell it in one county and not in the other. But I wouldn't oppose authorizing it to the counties. I just think it would be better to ban it statewide. Thank you.
Delegate Terasa.
No, sorry. I meant to go off mute, not off raising my hand. Sorry. Thanks, Madam Chair. So I agree with Delegate Ruth. And then to the point about it being too broad, I would just point out that that we're enabling the locals to do legislation, so they're able to work out the more specifics of it. And I agree with you, Madam Chair, that we already have neighbors fighting over this. So I really would like to see us not require, but allow for the counties to control to specify the control of it by the person whose yard it's in, but then ban the sale, because I don't understand allowing for the sale of something that I was confused by the chart, to be honest with you, because I think the reason it's now considered naturalized seems to be that it's so invasive. And so I just think of like the spotted lanternfly. Are they naturalized now because they're so prevalent, because they're so invasive? It seems to me that that's an odd, I don't know. I mean, there's probably a lot of science behind it, but that's just my confusion.
Thank you, Delegate Terasa. Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite confused on this fine structure that's in the bill as well. It talks about $50 offense and then up to $3,000. If you repeat it, you don't control it. I mean, I don't understand that, and I don't know how it's going to be enforced anyway, unless, as you said, a neighbor turned you in as not doing something.
Well, that's a good point. If we potentially, if this small body decides that it is something that a local jurisdiction should regulate, then we may have to remove those fines, because then that local jurisdiction would probably have to come up with their own fines anyway. So good point, Otto.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We've heard from MDA, and it sounds like, just so I'm clear, Steve and Kim, if this group would recommend that we pass this bill, potentially removing the fines and giving the local jurisdictions the ability to, quote unquote, regulate the sale and or the growing of this, which may not necessarily, I guess the question is could that local space ban the sale of it? They would not necessarily ban it, because it sounds like that's MDA's job, for whether it's a tier 1 or tier 2 plant, but they could potentially ban the sale of it. Is that correct, Kristen?
I'm not sure I caught the question.
I'm sorry, Kristen. If this bill were to move from recommended from this subcommittee, that we have decided that the local jurisdictions could, make that decision on their own. The question is, to the question of banning, would they be allowed to ban the plant or just ban the selling of the plant?
We don't have an amendment that does that. So right now the language in the bill is
yes, I know that.
So I don't know what the language would look like. I mean, if you wanted to, I mean, if you want to have allow the ban, you know, it to be banned, you'd have to have language to that, to that
Okay.
effect. So whatever the desire of the subcommittee is what the language would have to read. I mean, I don't have language or testimony on that.
Okay. Okay. Delegate Otto. And then we're going to move on.
No, I'm sorry, I hadn't took my hand down.
Oh, okay. I think we're going to take another week to kind of run this through, and then hopefully next week can make a final decision. It sounds like to me, most individuals would be comfortable just allowing the local jurisdictions to kind of regulate this. Because for instance, it may be an issue in one area and not an issue in somewhere else. So somewhere else that doesn't necessarily have to make any rules, but should it become an issue, they could make a rule per se. Does that sound about right? No, yes. Okay. Well, we could think about it another week and see what we can come up with for the next week. Steve and Kim, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I hope you're staying on for a little bit longer. We're going to move on to HB 152, Delegate Wells bills, the Department of Agriculture Urban Agriculture Grant Fund. We saw this bill last time. This essentially was just like a Baltimore City bill, but it has spread out to essentially the state because Baltimore City is not the quote unquote only urban area in the state. And so I know we have some amendments on the bill. Kristen.
So yeah, amendments I think they were emailed out a couple times. So sorry how that comes out piecemeal. So if somebody's missing something, maybe I'll just actually start with that. See if I can bring up the reprint.
You need to share.
I can share. I guess I just have to bring it up. I should have had this. Hold on 1 second.
Take your time.
All right, I'm having trouble finding an updated one, but hold on, I'll tell you where it's coming. So we have amendments from the sponsor of the bill.
Yes.
I'll get into where those are. One amendment that's not shown up here is the sponsor had reached out to me today to reduce the mandated funding from $250,000 for each of those fiscal years to $100,000. The amendment also alters basically the way this program is implemented. Instead of having this review board that was already established in statute and then modifying that, instead it establishes an advisory committee for implementation of the program, and that is would be on page 5 of the reprint after line 17. And so the membership and responsibilities is similar to what the sponsor was doing with the bill and amending the review board. And so that language, and then it would have, let's see.
I think it, Kristen, if I'm correct, it changed also some of the percentages to match the bill.
Okay.
The power bill.
That's correct. So I guess we have the percentages with, and I not to put MDA on the spot, but they might be able to better explain how this language would help better align with the urban
Power and
power.
Kristen, if you want us to comment.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I have Jason Kepler with me, and Jason runs our ag cost share program and runs the other urban ag grants, and he'll be glad to walk you through the amendments of when we met with the sponsor that she was agreeable to. So if you could go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely, Madam Chair. Thank you. Jason Kepler, Program Manager for our Conservation Grants Program, for the record. Thanks for the opportunity. So as was reported initially by our agency, we're very supportive of the proposed legislation. However, administratively, it presented some challenges, and the proposed amendments that you see before you today better align with the administrative procedures that we have within a number of programs within MDA. And we feel that having these amendments included in the bill would allow us more efficient administration of the grant funding, and really work in concert with some of the other pieces of legislation that we have, such as the Power and Water Infrastructure Bill and others.
Thank you. And there was also, I believe, a change, Kristen, and I think it kind of matches also Delegate Morgan's bill that we'll get to, about instead of saying ombudsman, it says a specialist, I believe.
That is for that's for the other bill.
I know, but I think it's changed in this one.
No, the specialist language does only relate to the ombudsman bill. We did hear from Steve McHenry Marbidco on some language that would allow and it would define an urban area as also including the boundaries of a municipal corporation. And it would also update the definition under the Water and Power Infrastructure Fund in a similar way. And I can bring that up too, if you'd like me to share my screen.
Yes, please. Oh, you know what?
And Madam Chair, from MDA's point of view, we've reviewed those two amendments, and we're quite fine with them.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, you're right, Kristen. This amendment was stuck to another thing. Sorry.
There's a lot of stuff that was sent out today. So yeah, so this is what this language does. So it basically, the first couple are just technical in nature. On number 3 of the items here, that's where we would update the definition of urban area to include areas within the boundaries of a municipal corporation. And then under number 4, that language is under the water and power infrastructure language, where it would similarly update urban areas, would include the area within the boundaries of a municipal corporation.
Provided that those definitions apply equally to both the power and water and this piece of legislation, that MDA would be supportive of that change.
Good to know.
Steve, just so I understand, like you were saying, that this language would need to be adopted in both this bill and add the existing provision. You wanted to adopt it in both, right?
Correct.
I just couldn't hear. Okay.
That way they're uniform and it's easier. There's less confusion with the potential recipients.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it has a co-benefit, I would guess as well, between the power infrastructure grant programming and this programming. There would be some continuity a bit.
We like that idea.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could add on to that.
Yes, Steve.
Marbidco currently offers a commercial agricultural lending incentive program and for commercial farming. So by adopting these amendments, both the MDA programs and the Marbidco program would be serving exactly the same geography. So it would all be the same in uniform across the state.
Awesome. Okay. Is there any questions, any discussions, any concerns?
And Madam Chair, just
Yes.
one other amendment that Maryland Farm Bureau had suggested, that the amount language be inserted that says at least, at the time the bill was drafted, it was $250,000, but the sponsors changed it to $100,000. So anyway, there'd be language at least $100,000 rather than just the specific amount.
Okay, awesome. And so if I'm given all this paper I have right here in my notes, This bill has been amended to change the definition of urban area. It changes the advisory committee. It changes the percentages of the essentially the grant program, and it changes the yearly appropriated amount to at least 100,000 a year.
I think for process, if the subcommittee wants to move forward on this bill, it might be best to adopt each amendment.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
so the record, we know what has been adopted. That's what's been proposed. The items you mentioned.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I got those out there for everyone to know what we're actually potentially amending. So is there a motion to, I guess we should start, well, first of all, is there a motion that, or an appetite for us to move forward with this bill first and foremost?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now that we have that, we should go by amendment, Kristen, or?
I think, I mean, I think that would be the best process. We could start with the sponsor amendments, then the sponsors tweak, then go to Marbigco, and then go to the Maryland Farm Bureau, or we could do the Maryland Farm Bureau when we're in this language, however, but I do think to break them up into separate votes because they're not all incorporated into one amendment would be the best way to proceed.
Yes, and so can I get a motion to move the sponsors amendments?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
And that would include the $100,000 instead of the $250,000 mandate?
Her amendments.
They're not shown in this amendment that was sent out. She made the request this afternoon.
Yes. All right. And so, well, no, I thought that was a Farm Bureau's amendment about the at least.
The at least part was, but the reduced funding amount was from the sponsor.
Understood. Okay. So I guess the next is Marbitco's amendment.
Do we need to vote on that? We moved.
I'm sorry. All in favor of the sponsors amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? No. Sponsor amendment is adopted. Is there a motion to move Marbitco's amendments?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of?
Hang on, is that the municipality one? Is
That's
that the
correct? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
An urban area would include those areas too.
Thank you.
Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I believe the Delegate Stein has taken an abstention. Marbitco's amendment has been accepted. And then we have Farm Bureau's amendment to change the funding amount to at least for the $100,000 that the sponsor has requested to change. Is there a motion? Hello?
So is this, my question is this necessary? I mean, if it's 100,000, but the administration wanted to fund it more, they could do that? Is that?
I think what this says is that if there's not 100, at least being that it could be more. Is that correct?
I think she's frozen, maybe. See.
Oh, me?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I thought you were talking to Delegate Ruth. So,
No.
So yeah, the at least language. I mean, I didn't think it was necessary. I think these can be funded, but I don't know that for sure.
I think he doesn't want to be trapped in just getting $100,000. If there's more money, then it's like, oh yeah, 1 year we can get 110, or 1 year we can get 200, I think it leaves it open rather than being stuck to the $100,000. If I
Yeah, I think that was what was behind the proposal. It just whether or not it's necessary. I don't think would be a limit to what could be, but maybe I think it's kind of an expression of saying at least gives an expression of, hey, this could be more.
Legislative intent.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes.
All right, I move the amendment.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor of the Farm Bureau's amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. We have moved the Farm Bureau's amendment. I feel like there's one more amendment, Kristen. Or is that it?
I think that is it.
Okay. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
I move the bill. As
Second.
amended.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All right, we have moved Delegate Wells' bill. Thank you, Kristen, for getting us through those. The next bill, HB 325. I know we're waiting on amendments. I don't know, between Kristen and Jen, if you want to briefly discuss what they may be. Am I still sharing my screen?
That is me.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry about that.
No, you can. My screen's jumping. I'm like, it may be me.
Of course, I'll let Delegate Terrasi answer this, but I received completed amendments and I handed them out. I'm not sure are we expecting more or if these are it.
So I'm sorry, I missed what you said. You said you received the amendment I sent or something?
I received a completed amendment that I believe was your most recent one, where the board would be required to establish an expedited process to authorize a veterinary practitioner to engage in the practice of veterinary medicine in the state. So it put it into the board's purview of establishing this process rather than requiring the board to authorize an out-of-state practitioner to practice vet care.
And then there's the second part that.
And then there's the second part, which would allow a vet technician or other clinical staff. You know what, the amendment came out from the amendment office. We need to tweak it, but it says a veterinary technician or other clinical staff who works in or for an animal shelter or an animal control facility to administer the rabies vaccine if these conditions are met. And then it would require the board to report back to the General Assembly by December 1, 2023 on the establishment of this process and whether there's any financial support needed to implement the expedited process.
You mean on the first part, on the expedited process, not on the rabies vaccine?
Oh, right. I'm sorry if I misspoke. I was just going down the lines. Yes,
Yeah.
that the special section relates to the expedited process, not the rabies vaccine. The rabies vaccine, this is an authorization that would come from the Department of Health.
Yes.
Yeah, so the bottom line with the rabies vaccine is it would allow for, it would only be in shelters, not in rabies, no, I'm sorry, not in clinics, but it would allow the rabies vaccine to be administered without the vet being in the building, which is sort of the important piece of this from my perspective or from our perspective, because it's a shortage of vets in certain areas that's keeping the animals for longer than they need to be in the shelters. So from my perspective, this is a final amendment. We met with the stakeholders this weekend and this week came up with this. You know, I can't tell you exactly what the vet board is saying, but we did send it to them and they did not send any objection to us. So I mean, I think it's ready, but that's up to the subcommittee if you think we need to do something further.
Delegate Ziegler, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, I saw you were off mute. Delegate Jacobs and then Steve from MDA.
All right, did these amendments meet the concerns of the veterinarians? Because I've gotten a lot of correspondence from the veterinarians opposing. And this week especially, so I'm just curious as to whether all these amendments did address their concerns or not.
They're intended to, I mean, I can, if the chairwoman will allow, I think Jennifer Bevan-Dangle can speak more to that, but we did take out the spay and neuter piece, which I think was a large part of the objection. We're not doing we're having a state board come up with an expedited process for reciprocity. And so there's not this automatic reciprocity that I think there was some concern about. And the rabies vaccines are now only in shelters. And it implements this a recommendation from a manual reference by the veterinarians. They kept referencing, and there's also referred to in the CDC regarding shelters, a recommendation for that. So I don't know if it'll be helpful to hear from Jennifer Bevan-Dangle, but.
Well, I've gotten a lot of correspondence from veterinarians, licensed veterinarians. And,
yes.
And I'd like to be able to run these amendments by them to see if it meets their concerns, is what I'm saying.
That's fine, because I know the health department for me had some concerns, and it looks like they're addressed somewhat in here. If Jennifer, can you fill in really quick, and we'll go back to Delegate Jacobs.
Happy to, although Delegate Terrassa did an excellent job summarizing what the amendments do. I do want to thank, we had representatives from the Maryland Veterinary Board and from the Veterinary Medical Association on a Zoom on a holiday Sunday. So we're very grateful. And these amendments, it is our understanding, do meet the concerns of all parties. They were sent to the Health Department, to the Department of Agriculture, to the Veterinary Board, and to the Veterinary Medical Association. And we've heard no sort of substantive responses back that anyone had any continuing concerns. So we understand it happened over a holiday weekend. So, silence isn't necessarily assent, but it is certainly our belief from the conversations that we've had that this is something all parties can agree to. As the delegate referenced, the rabies protocols come from this CDC publication that the veterinarians themselves referenced. By limiting it to animals that are in the shelter, we think that takes care of some of the oversight, some of the public health concerns that existed with allowing it to be done at clinics, sort of these public clinics. And it is certainly our hope and our belief that this met all the concerns and threaded the needle in a way that all the parties could live with.
Thank you so much for that. I do think it is fair to ensure that we do get something from the vets that say so, because it does sound like this is ready to go, but I would feel better knowing that they also put a stamp on this as well, because it does look like it's, because I've read a lot of the health department's concerns, and it looks like it answers or relieves them of their concerns. So if Delegate Terrassa or Jennifer, if you can get them to send something to us, to the committee, letting them know that they are satisfied, I'd be, and then we can probably re-review and pass this out hopefully next week. Does that sound okay, Delegate Terrassa?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jacobs, does that, okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
If there's, and I don't mean to put this on Delegate Jacobs, but if there's anything specific you see in there that you don't think is addressed from the people you're hearing from, if you could let me know, I'd be happy to take a look at that, just so I know before next week. But again, I don't mean to pressure on you to review it, just if something jumps out.
No, I think that's fair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Steve Conley at the Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
We've talked with the vet board, which is housed here.
Okay.
And they are satisfied with the amendments that were worked down over the weekend.
Okay. Well, if that is the case, Delegate Jacobs, is that satisfactory to you?
Well, that's not the board. That's not the vet
fair.
that I heard from.
Right.
I heard from several individual veterinarians.
Yeah, it's
That's
different. We just
That's
like
not the same.
veterinarians, so.
That's not the same as what Steve's talking about.
Well, yes, sir. Then we'll still hold it until next week. And I think to Delegate Terrasa's point, if there are specifics, please send them to her. And you know, we need to know that they're okay.
I'll reach out quickly as possible.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, thank you. I'm going to skip over 365 because I think there's going to be some discussion. And let's go to HB 389, Delegate Morgan's added value. I love this bill. Don't tell him I said so. Oh, am I recorded? Oops. I know that there was a question, Kristen, we wanted to know. So it's $100,000 a year, but it grows after every year. So there was a question about whether or not that's a flag for appropriations.
Right, and so that's the fiscal impact of
Okay.
implementing this position. So if the subcommittee wants to move forward with this, it's possible we might have to check in with the appropriations committee. There's no mandated funding or anything like that, but it's because the expenses graduate over. They project out over, I don't know, 5 fiscal years or something like that. And so the first fiscal year, I think it's under the fiscal limit. We might be okay, but it's just something I'm gonna have to check on if the subcommittee wants to move it.
And so just quickly, there are three amendments. I think the one amendment added livestock as an added. Do you have that?
Yeah, I'm bringing that up now. So it's clarifying the definition of value-added agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And these amendments were adopted in the Senate. And so it would mean
I think,
and it also includes activities, equine activities. That was another part of the amendment too.
Okay.
I can bring it up.
Yeah. Looking all through these papers, I thought I just had it here. Yes, here it is. Sorry. Yes, so it changes ombudsman to specialist.
And then this language here. Oh, sorry, I meant to bring up the reprint so it's easier to see. You know what? I don't think I had the reprint because I had the Senate bill. So this amendment number 2 is altering the definition of value-added agriculture. And one of that purposes was to make it clear that the enterprises providing equine activities would also be included in that definition. And then the remaining portion of the amendments are just technical and conforming.
And so unclear, biomass was not added.
So that was an amendment that was offered in testimony from Atlantic Biomass. And that language would further amend the definition to include all value-added products that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That would be in your floor system. I'll see if I can bring that up too.
Yeah, I don't have it.
That was not a part of the sponsor amendments.
No, okay, just, I'm sorry, Delegate Terrasa, then Delegate Ruth.
Yeah, I'm sorry to go back to this, but I'm just curious because we don't have the reprint, if you could just tell me, I'm confused about what value added agriculture.
I love this. Are you confused about what it actually is?
Yeah, I'm confused about what it is. I'm not objecting
So
to it.
think about, like, over the years, the thing Delegate Jacobs and I argue about all the time, milk, right? So I would argue that I'm not buying milk because I am lactose intolerant. But the one thing I do eat and drink, I have to have cream in my coffee, and I have to, and I like a mild or a sharp cheese. Then you've got ice cream, then you've got yogurt. It's the added value of milk outside of just the substance that you drink or you cook with, but it's all these other things that it makes. I think he gave the example of meat, right? And so it's the cuts and the steaks and the legs and the wings, but it's also the sausages, it's your charcuterie board, it's the stuff that ends up being like frozen, for instance, for fruits, right? Like it's jams, it's jellies, but it's also the stuff like that's frozen so you can do your smoothies or other additives. So it's like this life beyond its kind of natural freshness. Did I get that right, Delegate Ziegler and Delegate Jacobs and Delegate Otto?
Yes, absolutely. But I would also say it's something as simple as triple washed lettuce in a bag, or carrots turned into baby carrots in a bag that are also washed.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's not almond milk.
It is not almond milk. Well,
almond milk.
I don't know. I mean, if you produce almonds, actually, I think it is almond milk. It's just not, almond milk is not a dairy.
Not a dairy.
Yeah.
Don't get Delegate Jacob started.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Delegate Terasa.
Yeah, just one quick other question, separate question. Can somebody talk to why it was changed from ombudsman to specialist?
That could be just modernizing. That came from the Senate. And so I don't think I saw a reason behind that.
I mean, that's fine. I think we certainly want things to.
There's a senator that didn't like the word ombudsman.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So
All right.
he liked the word
Thank you.
specialist better.
That's a good explanation. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Kristen, actually, I want to be sure too that the products also included equine activities.
Correct.
Okay. The horse folks should be happy. So added value also being activities. Those are the amendments. Is there an interest not only to move this bill in general, but or an appetite to move this bill, but anybody interested in moving the sponsors amendments?
I moved the sponsors amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All of those in favor of the sponsor amendment say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion to move the bill as amended.
So moved.
Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry. Delegate Terasa?
I just want to clarify that the biomass piece wasn't part of that, right?
It was not. That was
Okay,
not a
thank
sponsor
you.
amendment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Was there a first and a second for the bill as amended?
I moved it.
Yes, second Otto. Thank you, Delegate Ziegler. All those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Bill moves as amended. There's my little marker here to make sure. Okay. Next bill is Delegate Love's Bill HB 516. This is just a report. Steve, is there anything you want to mention about this? You guys, you're good with this from what I understand?
Yeah, we think that the reporting will be better. We'll have more time to chase data that may not have been supplied with the February 1st deadline. So we'll have a better report.
Thank you. Kristen, were the dates changed in the bill? Because that would have been the only amendments.
There's no amendments, so that was
That's the entire bill.
That is the bill.
Thank you. Okay,
It's just a procedural change in the bill.
got it.
Move the bill.
Is there a second? All in favor of HB 516?
Aye.
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 Don't see any. Delegate Baker looked like he fell out. All right, the bill moves. Last bill, you guys are doing great. Last bill is HB 365, Delegate Layman Spade and Neuter bill. 365. I do believe we have some amendments on that, I believe.
Madam Chair, I'm having trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's just me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I must have threw my head down. I know there were some questions about this. One was the expansion for the use of the funds beyond what it's usually been used for, potentially changing the gross amount for small businesses, I think to $1 million instead of 500,000. And there was a question, I think, hopefully Kristen and I haven't been able to find out, maybe Kristen found out about whether or not you continue to pay the chemist fee every time you pay for your brand. I don't know if it's a one-time fee, if Steve can help us figure that out, or is it a fee every time you submit your fee for your food brand? And then there was a question about potentially a need for updating the guidelines. Steve?
Yeah, so it's an annual fee. There's actually two fees that they pay. The first fee is they register the state chemist. State chemist office does. We have inspectors that check and analyze the pet food to make sure that it's meeting the labels that they're sold under, and that's a $50 fee. And then after that, there's the spay and neuter board has $100 fee per item. There's about 10,000 of them. So they currently pay $150 if you combine both those fees, but they're two separate fees and they're annual that they have to pay to be able to
Okay,
in the state of
but
Maryland.
the question was, if I have 5 items per my company, I have 5 brand, like, would I be paying $150 each, or would I be paying $50 and then $100 per?
No, you'd be paying $50 for each and $100 for each.
Okay.
So it's $150 for each one
Right
now.
Got it.
Now, this bill would change that to the dollar amount would rise.
For
Well, for anybody that has more, I think it's I think they put in companies that have less than $500,000 worth of
it stays
sales.
100.
It stays at 100, but anybody that has more than $500,000 worth of sales would pay the increased fee.
Yeah, so I know there was a discussion, I don't know if we have it, about increasing that. It was apparently to $1 million and not 500,000, but did you get anything about that, Kristen? Okay, then it's not a thing then, I guess.
That really kind of takes care of some of the mom and pops, people that are selling at farmers markets, or a few boutique stores. We get complaints from the really small. We get complaints from everybody, but we get a lot of complaints from the really small folks who are trying to sell in the state of Maryland. And
okay, thank you, Steve. And before I move to Delegate Ruth, Kristen, did any amendments come in?
We did get one amendment from the sponsor. And
look at all my paper here. This is the priority.
yeah, so this relates to awarding the grants, and instead of the language giving priority, it would require to give additional consideration.
Okay.
I think that was that in part, that addressed one concern, I believe, that the Department of Agriculture raised.
Okay. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I wanted to mention that I'm jointly sponsoring this with Delegate Lehman, and she and I work very closely together on this. And secondly, the chemist fee has nothing to do with this. It's a completely separate program.
I know. I do know that. There was just a question about, is it a one-time fee that you just pay, or is it a fee every time you pay with the brand? That was the distinction.
I understand. Thirdly, I wanted to mention that there is a second amendment that's not been drafted. That was an additional concern about the wellness. In the bill, it allows for wellness care,
Yeah.
And there were concerns about that, and we are fine with changing that to routine vaccinations. We don't have an amendment drafted. It's a simple change. I don't know if Kristen can do that, just to change wellness care to routine vaccinations.
I can do that.
I'm sorry, you said it was now what routine?
It's currently allowing the funds to be used for wellness care at the time of spay neuter. There were concerns that that was too broad. And so we are fine with narrowing that to just say routine vaccinations at the time of spay neuter. And I don't know if Jennifer wanted to address that any further.
I'm happy to. I can just cite that it's line 7 on page 3. This was a concern raised by the Department of Agriculture that wellness care was too broad. And so we took it back to our shelter partners, and there are shelters who end up losing money because they can't really afford to do the vaccinations at the time of a spay neuter. So they really would like to see that included as a possibility, but they are comfortable with narrowing wellness care to just routine vaccinations.
I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask Steve, I was reading essentially that, and even if there was an additional kind of wellness care that somehow it went potentially against the guidelines, and guidelines would have to be updated regarding shelter. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, now I sat on the spay and neuter board for several years. The only thing that we do besides the spay and neuter was actually to make sure that they had rabies vaccines. This, I think, expands it a little bit. I think that the intent of the program was to do spay and neuters, and I think there's concern that the money will be less spay and neuters may get done if the money's being used for other items, and I think that's where our objection was.
Okay, so and then you would be okay if?
Yeah, I think we're okay
wellness
with
care was
the
removed.
narrowed the vaccination language that was just mentioned.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to go to Delegate Jacobs, Otto, and then back to Delegate Ruth.
So I'm trying to, if I remember from the hearing, that this will go to $145 from $100 to $145 per label. Is that correct?
No.
Go
ahead, Kristen. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, I think there was a couple different estimates out there. The fiscal note includes an estimate. I think it does, or was that the?
It's 110 in FY24.
Yeah, and
23 and 25.
And the Department of Ag has 109 to 119 to 131, and then it says by the time the program's next sunset, the fee would be 145.
Right.
That was a testimony, correct?
Yes, I thought I remembered that from the hearing, and I know that the companies were saying that was the highest in the whole United States, and that they had an issue with that increase, that we were paying more here in Maryland than anyone else. And I'm just, as much as I support the spay and neuter fund, I just, every time I buy dog food, it's going up $3 or $4 a bag. I just think we're jumping way too far out there.
Well, I'll follow up with this question for you to think about before I go to Otto. If it shouldn't rise with inflation, then are you saying that we should be putting what that fee is every year until the sunset? Because it's clear that it seems like the fee has been, or the funds have been stagnant, right? Because the fee hasn't changed. And if it's not going to rise with, the question is what should the fee be if it's not in this way? Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's my same concerns. We served on the initial task force that established that, and I voted for it, even when I had a pet food manufacturer in my district. And I think we just redid the sunset a couple of years ago, and we fought it then to keep it at the rate it was. And I think it's ridiculous to set things on a CPI.
Thank you. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to point out, first of all, that the initial fee increase, and I think that you kind of talked about that, is phased in over 3 years. So it's not like immediately jumping to it. And that it's based on inflation after that. And we're talking about, small shelters, small nonprofits sometimes, and their costs have gone up due to inflation. So I think it's only fair that the amount that is coming in is due to inflation, is covered based on inflation. And also the first 3 years are based on past inflation. But when we talk about going up to the sunset, we don't know what the rate of inflation is going to be over the next 7 years or 8 years until the sunset. So that can only be a really rough estimate, because inflation could be lower over the next 10 years. And, we had, in terms of setting it a fixed amount, then it's a question of what it's based on. And, that's something that we looked at over the last year, whether there would be any basis for it. And inflation just seems the really most fair way to decide what the increase should be, because everybody's costs go up based on inflation.
And that's true. And Delegate, has there been a thought about, so the sunset is 2028? When is the sunset? It doesn't say in the bill.
It doesn't say in the bill. I can look it up while you guys discuss.
Okay. So I mean, the question then becomes, Delegate, we've seen inflation rise and, very, 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 very high, right? There's, food is up, so many other things are up, and, necessarily our paychecks aren't necessarily up, or they don't match like inflation. And so the question becomes, what happens if inflation is moving faster, right, than, the money that we need to still bring in to and then pay for this. And so that is a question.
And that's why we have to make those decisions, why we meet for 90 days to pass a budget each year based on the revenue estimates.
Delegate Ruth.
I don't have the law in front of me, but we did just pass the 10-year sunset extension last session. So
it's September 30th, 2032.
Okay.
2032. Okay. I guess the question would be, are there protections in case it goes it goes higher than, I think that's a fair question. It's a fair question.
I don't believe that there's anything in the bill, Jennifer, do you know, that would limit the rise?
There isn't. I could see, obviously the sponsors would have to be the ones to say this or not, but I could see potentially saying that a reevaluation of the continued indexing, should be included when the fund is renewed in 10 years. That could be uncodified language that would be at the end of the legislation. And it would sort of prompt this committee to revisit this discussion.
But 10 years from now?
There could be uncodified language that sort of prompts a revision in 5 years, or, the committee should get a report back from the Department of Agriculture on the rate of inflation and the projected rates of inflation, and whether the indexing should be sunsetted or removed pending the bill's sunset in 2032.
Okay. Delegate Ruth.
Yeah, I think, I'd be fine with that. I could also see something limiting the rate of increase. If inflation were to suddenly have like a huge jump in 1 year, much higher than the normal rate of inflation, that, we don't want to cause a sudden hardship. So I could see something like that. I don't know what Delegate Laneman's position on that would be, but I could see something like that. And I did also want to point out, though, that some of these large pet food manufacturers make billions of dollars in revenue.
Sure.
I have a question. I don't know how to raise my hand on
That's fine. Go ahead, Delegate Baker.
Okay, in my notes here, it talks about Maryland currently has the highest fees on the pet food. What are the other states receiving?
You want to know what's the fee in other states?
Yeah, I mean, if we're paying the highest, I'd like to know what, I need something to compare to.
That's a fair statement, Delegate.
Thank you.
Steve, do we know that by any chance?
Well, I don't think most states have a spay and neuter program similar to
But some do, I'd like to have, some do
Yeah.
have.
But I think it's kind of apples and oranges. I don't think that they charge a fee on pet food in most other states. I think most other states only pay the state chemist fee to register the product to be able to sell it.
Well, is it possible to find out what that is? I think you could be correct. I think you probably are correct in that.
Yeah, I don't have it before me, but I could try to find out.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Good,
We'll try to get it for you as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I think it is fair. That was mentioned in the during the hearing that they're paying the highest rates. But so what are the rates and are they comparable? I think that's a fair question. If they're not comparable, then it's a moot point. If they are, then we should probably discuss it. So we're gonna
hey, this is sorry, this is Nathan Bowen, the vet board. We can absolutely look into that. I know there are 2 or 3 other states that have comparable programs. We can see what those are specifically, and we'll report that back to you.
Thank you. Delegate Ruth, I think in the meantime, we'll hold this until next week. Hopefully next week we can make a concrete decision and just make sure we'll be gathering all this information, but also all of the amendments, have them ready to go for next week so we can make a final decision and decide to move or not move. I don't know this particular bill, but it's a good bill. So it looks like we are done. Was somebody about to say something?
I just said thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Welcome. So I think we are done, Kristen?
That's the list today.
That's the list today.
Has a question.
Yes, Delegate Jacobs. Unmute yourself.
I'm just waving by because we're done.
Oh, Lord. Well, yes, we are. I just want to say next week we will, again, we're going to pick back up Delegate Love's Black Bear bill, Delegate Love's snare trap identification, Delegate Foley's running bamboo, Delegate Terrasa's vet bill, and Delegate Lehman's spray and neuter. So hopefully we can.
Delegate Boyce?
Yes, sir.
We did pass HB 406. I think.
Yes, we did.
I have that. It's not a bill that I handled, but I did.
It is. I'm sorry. I highlighted it. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I did highlight it. My bad. Woo, about to get beat up. All right, it's my bad. My bad. But we were waiting on Delegate Love's bill, the 378. Okay. All right, we're good. Thank you guys so much.
I was booted off, and I guess you're going to have to educate me as to how I can get the host to put me back on in a timely manner.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right.
There's something.
My apologies. There was a phone call, and I was preparing testimony for a bill that Delegate Boyce has on.
Okay. That's all right. I'll just.
My apologies.
I can be made a I think you can make co-host maybe.
Yes, next week I will definitely make you.
You can do that, like me and Patrick.
Delegate Baker, I have a tin hat for you. You can wear that. You're down that hallway where the connections aren't good.
I sat here 30 minutes waiting, as any delegate would do. I waited patiently.
Oh, you can send me a text message next time, Delegate Baker. I would certainly take care of you. Well, thank you all again. Another great meeting.